This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com. Coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long. We're on question 186 of Arthur J. Stansbury's Catechism on the Constitution of the United States. Catechism. It's a word in the New Testament, catechism, in the Greek New Testament. And catty, we say, for example, cattywampus. This is the catechism. People say catechism, but it's a Greek word, and there's a Hebrew equivalent in the Old Testament, by the way. It's God's ordained way of teaching. It seems like when you read the Bible, you see that people are catechized. Now, the content of the catechism isn't always specific in the Bible when the word is used, and the Hebrew word, the comparable Hebrew word in the Older Testament. But it consists of learning by a series of questions and answers. And the student is to learn the answers, and then when he's examined, the question is asked. It's an oral catechism. Oral. You do it orally. Then the student answers. And the important thing about that is it teaches also the art of speaking, and certain words are used to get across the truth. The Presbyterians have a catechism called the Westminster Catechism. That's from the men that were assembled at Westminster during the English Civil War to give advice to Parliament about how not to pass legislation that goes beyond the bounds of the Bible. They requested the men to do that, and out of that came what we call today the Westminster Confession. There's the Heidelberg Catechism of the Dutch Reformed and German Reformed Church, the Heidelberg Catechism, and then the Baltic Catechism, or the Belgic Confession, they call it, the Belgic Confession. And that's for the Reformed groups. That's the Dutch Reformed, the German Reformed, which were the same in America, spoke pretty near the same tongue. And then there's the Presbyterian Catechism, which is adhered to by the many in America for a long time and still. And then there's the London Confession of 1689, I believe. It was fashioned on the Presbyterians' Westminster Confession. But then the other groups, the Lutherans, have a catechism called Luther's. Martin Luther wrote it. And it's a little bit different than the Reformed Catechism, the Belgic, the Heidelberg, the Westminster, and the London Baptist Confession of 1689. And those are catechisms too. They are made into catechisms. Take the truth of the confession and put it in a catechism. And then this fellow here, Arthur J. Stansbury, being a Christian man, by the way, he's a man of the cloth, a clergyman. He said, well, I've learned the Westminster Catechism. Why don't I put the Constitution in the Catechism? It's the laws of nature's God, unwritten. Why don't I do that? Well, he did, and did a pretty good job. We're going through it. When I was a senior in high school, we had to pass a Constitution test to get out of high school to graduate. And we went through to prepare for that exam for a year. We went through questions and answers, and we discussed. We even drafted our own Constitution to see if we got it close after we got done. I mean, we did it together. It was a small town. I went to a small high school, and I had I had relatives in the class, kinfolk, and I had other people that were kinfolk by marriage from different families. We all kind of knew each other. That doesn't mean we got along. Don't misunderstand me. Family doesn't always get along, but as long as we were in school, we got along pretty good, I reckon. And I learned more doing that in high school, getting ready for that Constitution exam, than I learned in law school about the Constitution of the United States. That's a true story. What we need, in law school, of course, I learned about how the courts, that's what a lawyer is, an officer of the courts. So you learn how that one branch of government interprets our Constitution, and that is important because in individual instances of individual cases, that's where justice occurs. We read cases about the Constitution of the United States. But in high school, I just learned about the Constitution. I learned the facts of the matter, and that's what we're missing, friends. See, by the time people go to law school, they don't teach them the facts of the matter. You don't sit down and read the Constitution. They figure if you're educated correctly, you should know something about that. But people don't. And law students don't either. They're not taught. It doesn't occur. And that's what we're trying to do here, is teach. That's all we do, is try to expose those that are willing to listen to the laws of nature and the laws of nature's God. And friends, our Christian culture in America, Americanism is Christian culture. It's inseparable. The longer I live, the more I realize that. I'm reading right now more about the Mercerburg controversy in Pennsylvania, the Barton Stone movement in East Kentucky, and the Campbellite movement in West Virginia, and the Cumberland Presbyterians in Tennessee and Kentucky. And all of those groups together were part of the same movement and the same controversy. And they flooded into the Ohio Valley on both sides and dominated American culture. It's a Christian culture. And the things that they did, we still do. When we don't understand where we got it, we just do it. In our government and in our world. Christian culture. Now, I didn't say Christianity. Christianity is a matter of the kingdom of God and the new birth. But if there is a critical mass of Christian folk in a country, then the country will have Christian culture, and that's what holds the country together. They will dominate, whether they understand it or not, whether people like it or not. Christian culture is the Bible culture, the culture of the Bible. The laws of nature and the laws of nature's God. The laws of nature's God, that phrase denotes the Bible. The laws of nature denotes our common law tradition. Question 186, our Constitution is a significant slice of that as applied to government. Question, how does a man become president of the United States? I make an observation here. He says, how does any man become president of the United States? How does any man become president of the United States? Why didn't he say, Arthur J. Stansbury, how does any person become president of the United States? Or how does any man or woman become president of the United States? Why doesn't he say that? Because the Constitution and those that drafted it, and Stansbury in the year 1828, the same year as Webster's dictionary, it wasn't in their remotest mind, the remotest thinking that any woman would ever try to run for president of the United States. Why? Because that wasn't the intent of the Constitution. That wasn't part of our Constitution, that a woman would run for anything or even vote. To put it another way, it wasn't in anybody's mind, man or woman. You say, oh yeah, there was, no, they knew better. They knew that wasn't in anybody's mind. Those that drafted and those that ratified the Constitution, that was not in their remotest thinking. You want to talk about original intent, that was the original intent of our Constitution, was that men, not women, would be president of the United States. that men, not women, and our federal legislation still says that, would be members of the militia. It is the job of the militia. Government is the job of the militiaman. Let me say that again. Government is the job of the militiaman. Period. Who are the militiamen? The militiamen are who God says they are, and they are the males, not the females. They're at common law, and I'm giving you history here. I'm not trying to change your mind about anything. I'm just telling you how it is and how it was. That's important to know. If you don't know how things were, how can you, and you don't know the trajectory we were put on, how can you know where we're headed and where we're going? You can't. So don't complain against me. I'm giving you history. This is the fact of the matter, and what we're lacking is facts. We're so much so that there's a movement afoot in America that is trying to, the left always does this, trying to eliminate the facts of history, trying to blot it from our memory that George Washington was a slaveholder, trying to blot it from our memory that Nathan Bedford Forrest was a slaveholder and a slave trader, trying to blot it from our memory that Abraham Lincoln wasn't for equality of black men and white men. He wasn't for that. He was for shipping them to Africa. And we did. We started a country in Africa to ship them to, called Liberia, still there, and shipped thousands. Thousands migrated there, by the way, to their detriment and to their poverty and to their hurt. They were better off here. I'll tell you the story of a slave case. I've got it written in the comparative law text, Excellence of the Common Law. The Matson slave case, a fella from Bourbon County, Kentucky, which is right next to where my mother's family is from, in Fleming County, Kentucky. Bourbon County, he'd come up across the river and he farmed a farm in Coles County, Illinois, where the dirt was blacker. And he owned it, and he kept one of his slaves there. And the slave's wife, Mary Bryant, she stayed down with him with her 4 children. Then he'd bring her up for planting, tending the crop, and harvest through the summer. Long story, you can read about it in my book, but eventually, because she was freed by a court under the free soil doctrine of our common law, she decided, her and her husband, they wanted to go to Liberia, because the Americans had, and through the donors' money in America, established a country there. She went there with her family. And a fella who had helped in that habeas corpus case, that where she got her freedom, went to Liberia to investigate what was going on there, and found Mary and her 4 children in the worst squalor that could be imagined. And she begged this man from Coles County, Illinois, to please, please, please take her back and her children back to America. But he couldn't, and I don't remember the reason why. Maybe it was financial, I don't know, but he couldn't get her back. You know, the rest of the story is important. Without the rest of the story, you really can't make a decision about something. What was best for Mary Bryant? Shucks. She got her freedom with her children. And what would have been better? To go to a dangerous place of squalor like Liberia, Africa, or to stay here and try to eke out a living in a place that God had blessed with always here. It's always been better here, always. Even during the American Revolution, we were so more opulent and wealthy just as a people than the people in England. That's one of the reasons they wanted us back. They wanted to abuse us. They wanted us to milk the cow and send them the milk and keep none for ourselves. That's what their policy was. And once they saw what was going on here and how our houses in general were bigger than theirs, and we had more wealth flowing than they did because of the natural resources here, they wanted it. That was one of the reasons they tried to bring us to heel. Mary lived in that kind of a world where there was lots of natural resources, and even if you were on the lower economic scale, enjoyed life better. That's what we should be striving for. People aren't going to produce wealth for our society unless they have a reward of money, friends, and lots of it. But it is true. We used to say this when I ran for Congress. It was the byword back then. I don't hear it as much now. The rising tide raises all boats. Ocean liners, aircraft carriers, and John boats. All of them do better. Everybody does better. When those that are doing really well do better, we all enjoy the benefits of economic prosperity. That's a fact. And those that say differently, Miss Francine, I'm going to take a minute here and talk about the political difference before I get into this. These are things that come up. Before I get into the Constitution, we'll do that. The difference between how the Democrats, the left, organize their political power and how the right organizes its. Now, you look at the left, we call them Democrats today, they're wackos. It's clown town in the Democratic Party, always has been, but it's really coming out now more and more as time goes along, evil grows. They have coalition. This should encourage those on the right. And once you know this, you know how to wage the battle. How do they hold it together? Coalition. How do the conservatives hold together their movement? They do it by consensus. Is there a difference? Oh boy. Now, in order to tell the difference, we need to just define those fancy Latin words. They're both Latin-rooted words. I wish we had English words that would suffice. But the Democrats organize their power and have their power by coalition. What's coalition? Coalition is, I'll give you what you lust for. You don't have to agree with my life. You don't have to agree with my worldview. You don't have to agree with I'm Roman Catholic. I'm Buddhist. I'm Greek Orthodox. I'm Hindu. But I can give you what you want to fill your lust, to make you feel better about yourself. I can do that. You can do that? I'll go along with you. I'll go along with you. Give me what I want. That's called coalition. Finding agreement, giving you what you want, giving you what you want, giving you what you want. Well, what does that come down to? Well, consider what they do. They want higher taxes and they want to hand out goodies. They want to be the sugar daddy. They want to give everybody what they want. And they don't care if people agree with them on anything else. That's called coalition. But once that changes, you've got to keep giving people what they want. You say, well, Nancy Pelosi, Barbara Boxer, and Dianne Feinstein, what did they give people? Well, they just wanted higher taxes. They wanted to get what they wanted, and they were very wealthy. They went in without much. They're millionaires, close to billionaires when they get out. They get what they want. That's coalition. Hey, you put me in office, I get to get what I want. Okay, you're in. You get what you want. You can steal all the money you want. But we got to get what we want. Okay, the unions, we're going to give the teachers union what they want. We're going to give the Mexicans, immigrants, and the illegal aliens, if they're here, what they want. I have friends that are from another country, love them to death, but they support the Democrats. Why? Because they want their families to come over here, and they're having a hard time getting them here. Well, I said to them, shucks, just get them into Mexico and they can walk across the border. They're good folk. They're trying to do it legally, but they will support the Democrats if the Democrats tell them, we're going to get you what you want. That's coalition. What's the right? Now, we use Democrat, Republican, left, right, whatever you call them. But the right, which is now the Republicans, or more to the right, how do they organize their power? They organize their power not by consensus, not by telling people, I'm going to give you what you want. You don't have to agree with me about anything else because I'm getting what I want. Republicans say to people, we believe we believe freedom is the goal. Freedom to think and act. We're giving you the big picture here. We want a powerful country where we're free to fail, free to try and fail, free to succeed, free to take a risk. That's the right. And by the way, we believe God will judge us if we pollute the land that he gave us. We're not concerned about the outcome. We're concerned about due process. We're going to work so that everybody has a fair shot. That's called due process. We want everybody to have a fair shot. We want to reward lawful behavior, and we want to punish unlawful behavior. They give them the big picture, and people say, that's the kind of world, that's the kind of country I want to live in. I want our country to be the leader in the world, and if I have to discipline myself to take those risks and be free to succeed or fail, I want to do that. That's a different mindset, friends. And that's how they draw people together. What did DJ Trump say? We're going to make America great again. That's a big picture, see? That's not saying I'm going to give this group what they want. I'm going to give the American tribal man, the red man, what he wants, the American black man, the Negro man, what he wants. I'm going to give the Caucasian man what he wants. I'm going to give the Oriental man what he wants, and you all get what you want, and then I get that's Democrats. That's the left all over the world. It's always been that way. The law of the city is that way. You give me what I want, and I get what I want, we're okay. On an individual, what I want, I'm a union member. I want my union benefits. I want a job. I'll give you what you want, and I'll destroy the man that employed you, but I won't tell you this. I'll destroy him, and you won't have a job anymore. They don't tell them that. Man, have I seen that happen in my lifetime over and over and over again. The unions try to gain the upper hand, get what they want, and the politicians help them, and then the business goes out of business. Let's make America great again. See, that's big picture. That's not saying to any individual group or person, I'll give you what you want. I used to walk when I politicked. I love to do parades. We had 27 counties. Can you imagine how many 4th of July parades there were in 27 counties? When I started, I was trying to drive as many as I could. Then I had a fella who owned some farm stores, had a helicopter to get around to his farm stores. And I get on his helicopter and he'd fly me around, or his man would fly me around to the different 4th of July parades. And you get to meet a lot of people. And I had a lady who ran a candy business, filling candy machines. She'd give me boxes of candy. Her and her son ran the business. Her husband passed away. And I'd pass out candy, but a lot of the politicians would take the candy, walk behind a vehicle or a trailer that had the box in it, and they'd just throw it. I wouldn't do that. Besides, I could make it last longer. I'd take it and I'd walk down and I'd just give it to people one at a time. That way I could look them straight in the eye, see, and I could, hello, and it would be personal. And then I'd see the older crowd behind, and they felt a little left out. The kids would be out front and the aggressive people, and I'd look at them and look them in the eye, and I'd toss them a piece. I like that. And then I get to talk to people sometimes or say something to them. And I was doing that one time, 4th of July parade. And this big, scary looking hussy of a woman come charging up from behind through the children. I'm glad I didn't meet her in a dark alley, put it that way. She probably weighed more than my pickup truck. And she started screaming at me. I tried to give her a piece of candy. She wouldn't take it. Started screaming at me in front of all these people. I want to know what you're going to do for me. I want to know what you're going to do for me. Might have been drunk. I don't know. Some of them, sometimes they are when they do that. You see, that's the left. They want to know. I don't care who I am. They don't care about my family. They don't care about my big point of view that I want my country to be respected around the world. They don't care about that. They want to know what I'm going to do for them right now, today. Well, I saw that in spades everywhere I went. That's the difference between, and people use these words, and you could use other words, but coalition. That's where you promise people individually and groups what they get, what they want, and make America great again. So we all, rising tide raises all boats, and we all have a chance, have an opportunity, a shot to succeed or fail. I've done both. How about you? And I wouldn't give it up for nothing, friends. I wouldn't give it up for nothing. I'm trying to succeed now in what I do, teach the laws of nature. And the laws of nature is God. As long as God allows me, it's all in the providence of God, friends. To live in that kind of a world where you're free to succeed or fail is in the providence of God, and that's where I want to live. I hope you feel that way too. And in that world, if you live that way, if that's your mindset, if the Spirit of God has given you that mindset, you depend on God. And you're not running the government and asking questions about what they can give you. It's a different mindset. Coalition, the left. Consensus, we have a consensus and agreement on the big picture. We agree. We want to make America great again. That means I got to be free to succeed or fail. Well, let's go to 186. It said, how did we choose who the president is? Do the people themselves at once choose the president of the United States? Remember, our Constitution of the United States is a brief of common law as applied to government and how it operates. Our common law is not outcome standards. Our common law is due process, how things are done, the procedure, the process, the course of process. We call it due process. Due process only exists in common law countries. That's what common law is, and that's what this is, the common law. How, not what, not result-oriented, but process-oriented. How do we choose the president? Do the people do it all at once? No. Answer, no. Catechism, see. This might lead to great confusion. It's almost said, I might lead to great confusion. Well, I'm sure I've done that before. But the people choose the legislatures of the different states. These legislatures appoint electors, and those electors choose the president. But the people choose the legislatures of the different states. The legislatures appoint electors, and these electors choose the president. That's a process at three levels. It uses three levels. Number one, the people. Now, who's the people? We've talked about this if you've taken our militia course. That's part of our Christian culture, that word people. It's from the King James Bible. It's also from the other translations. The people, used hundreds of times in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, but in the Old Testament, the people is the Hebrew word am. Am, and it always says the people. Well, what is the am? It is a band or a group of armed men. That's why I said a while ago, the people, we the people of the United States. That's from our Christian culture, our Puritan and Presbyterian Christian culture in those days. The word the people, we the people of the United States, the preamble of our Constitution. Who's the people? That's the militiamen, friends. In every case, you can go back and read the writers, the ones that ratified the Constitution, our Constitution of the United States, the ones that drafted it. They say point blank, I've got quotes just all through. Matter of fact, one chapter is devoted to quotes, a series of quotes. Who are the people? The people are the militiamen. They say the militia are the people are the militiamen. Period. That's it. When you see the word people in our documents, we're talking about the men, the militiamen. They have a twofold duty: defense of the land by armed force if necessary, and defense of the law of the land by serving on the jury. That's where justice is done. That's it. That's the fundamental duties of government, by the way. Without those, you don't have government. All these other things we do don't amount to much. They hurt us more than help us. What we really need is the militiamen to defend the land and to make sure justice is served by serving on the jury. Keep that fundamental in your mind. People say, "Oh, it's not that simple, Brent. It's more complex. You don't understand government." Don't give me that. I don't know. I deal with all that minutia when I have to. But I'm telling you, I'm giving you my testimony. I speak as a military man of 13 years. I speak as a lawyer of a few decades. I speak as a clergyman. I'll just give you my testimony and try to change your mind, but the minutia doesn't matter. Everything in minutia whatever minutia there is, it must conform to those two things, or government is more dangerous. It's the fire that got out of control. Remember, the fire in your house can keep you warm in the winter, and it can help you cook food. We used to cook food on our stove. You got a pot-bellied stove, you can cook food on it. And when we weren't cooking food on it, we had a teapot, a copper teapot, sitting on the pot-bellied stove to keep moisture in the room in the wintertime, because in the wintertime, when you have the stove in the room, it dries the air out. That's unpleasant. So we'd put a tea kettle on top, and it wouldn't boil, but it would constantly be evaporating into the air. And then if I wanted, I could fry eggs and bacon. Boy, I could do that. We had lots of bacon because we were butchering hogs and keeping the stuff out in the smokehouse. In the wintertime, we kept it in the milk house. I'd go and we'd wrap it inside of feed bags, and I'd go out there and get me some fresh bacon or a chop or something, and I'd fry it up, and I'd put some eggs in there. And when you're 14 or 15, you're so hungry you can't see straight most of the day. Well, I'd put it up on top of that, and it'd cook. Or I remember doing that when I was a little boy. Then we got a warm morning stove. It laid down, and we could load the stoves in the end like this. You could put bigger logs in it, and you could bank it up for the night, but I could cook on that too, believe it or not. I'd get hot. That thing gets so blasted hot. I shouldn't have done this. I'd run by myself. I'd get it so hot the stovepipe would turn red. I don't mean a little red. I mean red. That's the way you start chimney fires, you got to be careful. And it'd get red, and then it'd get going like this. It was sticking up out of the stove, then it'd go over in the stove, the chimney hole, and it'd go like that. And it'd get to rocking back and forth, going boom, boom, boom. When it get real hot, that heat would pump it. They say, that's dangerous. Don't do that. Don't let your kids do it either. Kids, well, my grandma would bust my head. She heard me say that. She used to say, "Brent, children are not goats. Children are children. Call them children." Oh, yes, Grandma. And I would. But our culture calls them kids. Now, there's nothing more adorable, by the way. Nothing. I know things as adorable as a baby goat, a kid, but I don't know what it'd be. There's some other critters, I suppose, but they're adorable in their own way. Little kids. They get to playing around. Boy, do they get to playing around. Bedeviling one another, butting one another, jumping around, playing king on the mountain. They like to get up high on things, as you know. We always had problems. They'd jump up on our truck or our car. One time I parked my car in the drive, and I said, well, I'm going to make sure park it far away from the pickup truck. So, because the goats, they'd get up on top of the pickup truck, and then they'd want to run and see if they could jump to the other vehicle. Well, they got their hooves can scratch the paint, So I'd always park it kind of far away so they wouldn't be tempted. That old truck, I didn't care. It was a 52 Chevy pickup. I had some rust on the hood. I just assumed they'd polish that rust off a little bit, but I didn't want them jumping on my car. Oh man, I parked that thing way over there. And those little boogers, They get up on that pickup truck and they get in the back in the bed. It was a 1952 Chevy. They start on the hood, they get a run at it, and then they jump up on top of the cab, and then they keep the momentum going and get down in the bed, and they get enough steam up, and then they jump as far as they could. I was shocked how far they could jump. They'd land on my car. I kept trying to move it further away. Well, to them, that was just a challenge. And here they were, see, every day they'd get a little bigger and they could jump a little higher, or a little further. I mean, back then that bothered me because I didn't want my car scratched. But today, who cares, you know? Well, here we are. Oh, I was talking about, what was I talking about? Oh, who shall become president? But the people choose the legislature. Okay, the people, that's the militiamen. Now, I'm telling you how it was, what was intended by the Constitution of the United States. What was intended? The original intent, by the way, that's an important way to approach any writing of legal significance. You cannot know, listen to me, friends, you cannot be confident to know what our Constitution of the United States means at any given point, what our Bible means at any given point, what a contract means at any given point, what a trust indenture means at any given point, unless you know the intent behind it. How can you know that? Well, sometimes people read the debates in Congress when they pass legislation or the debates in the state legislature. Or sometimes you just say, well, your interpretation of this is absurd. Absurdity is a good test. Just utter absurdity. I mean, you take a bunch of politicians like in Congress, what is it, 400 and, well, you have 335, right? And then 535 counting the Senate, isn't it? Oh, yeah. And it was clearly said that it was lawful to shoot a police officer in the performance of his duty or a noxious animal. There's two ways you could have taken it, but that was absurd. And so you take 500, let's say at the national level, counting the Senate, 535 wacko politicians. Why do I say wacko? Because it is the nature of politicians to be unreasonable. Wacko. And they get worse as they stay there. It's a fact, friends. The nicest people can be that way because they're reacting to voters. They just want to stay in office. You've heard them talk. You get in politics. They used to tell us in politics, Miss Francine, that if you get your name on the ballot, you automatically lose at least 50 IQ points. Well, that's hyperbole, but you do say stupid things in politics. I remember Gerald Ford was vice president of the United States at the time, and they were trying to throw Nixon out and all that. And he came to a neighboring county where I'm from, and I made a point of going over and listening to him. Well, he's the one that, I got it from the little airport down here, and as we were driving over, and I was looking at the beauty of the fields, and I thought about this is the heartland of America, and this is, all the political baloney that politicians talk about. Talk. And he's the one that said that Abe Lincoln was born in a log cabin he built with his own hands. Now, he said that. I heard George Bush say one time on an airplane, they were interviewing him when he was running for president. I'm talking about the old man. He was going bird hunting with somebody, that was a big deal with some of these guys. You always want to go bird hunting. Well, I like bird hunting, but for these politicians that people take them, they'd shoot each other. Remember that one fella who ran for vice president, Cheney? No, he's the one who got shot, Miss Francine, with a shotgun. Remember going bird hunting?
He
was Bush's vice president. That's what it was.
Cheney shot somebody.
Oh, he shot. Oh, yeah. Boy, I get my facts wrong here. Thank you, Miss Francine. Yeah, what a bunch of goofballs. The people choose the legislatures of the different states. Okay, the people, that's the militiamen. They elect the legislature in your state. These state legislatures appoint electors, and then we got a third level, and those electors choose the president. That's called the Electoral College. Question 187, explain this more particularly. Explain this more particularly. Answer, you know what is meant by the legislatures of the states. They consist of the persons chosen in each state to make the state laws. These persons, state legislatures, when met together, appoint in any way they think proper. They do it any way they want. The number of persons who are called electors, because they afterwards choose the president of the United States. You see, the president of the United States is not chosen by popular vote. That's called the Electoral College. There is no direct choosing by just the voters of America of the president of the United States. Why? Because our Constitution set it up that it wouldn't happen that way. But why did the ratifiers of the Constitution do that? The militiamen of the 13 original states. Why? I'll tell you exactly why. They weren't stupid. Man, I'm amazed at the wisdom. There were no big cities in America in those days that resembled anything we have today, where we have millions and millions of people in one city. Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, Houston, Phoenix. When I lived in Arizona and I was in the mining business, we didn't live in Phoenix, but Phoenix was, greater Phoenix, a few 100,000 people. Then it went to 750,000. They tell me now it's up 3 million, thereabouts. Big cities, Las Vegas. First time I went to Las Vegas was in 1959. A little boy I was. It was a town of about 50,000 people. Now look at it. Well, just go on back in our history another couple of hundred years when our country started, and think how little the towns they called them cities. They were very small. They didn't have the political power they have today. California, even Los Angeles, San Francisco and the corridor going up to Sacramento and San Diego didn't have the power they have today 30, 40 years ago. But today, in all these states I'm talking about, the cities control the state houses because of the number of people that live in the cities. Chicago controls Springfield, Illinois. Las Vegas controls Carson City, Nevada. Los Angeles and San Francisco control Sacramento, California. Seattle controls Washington, controls the state house. It's true all over the country. Houston and Dallas-Fort Worth control Texas, getting there, and control Austin, the state capital. Well, they foresaw how bad this could get. They said, we have a direct election of the president by popular vote all over the country. The cities will control our country, and our prosperity will begin to wane. Why would prosperity begin to wane if the cities control the country? Because city culture, the city law, is primarily and foremost a consumptive culture. A consumptive culture, not a productive culture. The rural areas, the outlying areas, are productive culture. That's where crops are grown and minerals are mined. Without raw materials, then there is no wealth, period. There's nothing. No products. Oh, you could have labor, but if you don't have raw materials, you haven't got anything. You need both. I understand that. But without raw materials, that's the foundation. You don't have oil production, gas production, coal production, gold, silver, copper, None of that without the rural areas. And agriculture, how big is that? That's big. I mean, really big. Well, if you got a state like Illinois or California, well, California is more pronouncedly this way, where the cities are now controlling the water supply to the most productive agricultural state in the union. That's California in dollars. They're on the brink of wiping out. The reservoirs are empty. They want to wipe out the agricultural sector. A parasite, that's the left, the consumptive culture, the cities. Oh, Brent, there's production that goes on in the cities. There are factories there. Yeah, but the foundation of those factories remains the rural areas. And by the way, the manufacturing concerns are leaving the cities and always have for years sought to be out in the country. Did you know that? Sought to be out in the rural areas. Large manufacturing concerns out in the middle of nowhere all over the country have been that way. Why? Well, I've had manufacturers tell me. The largest agricultural product plant, probably in the world at one time, was, it's still there, I think. A little tiny town of 1,200. I talked about it the other day, yesterday, Mowequa, Assumption. Second largest John Deere dealership right there. Why is it out in the middle of nowhere? Because manufacturers have discovered, and they've told me this, that if you go out in the middle of nowhere and open up a factory, if you can find enough people around there, they'll work harder and more consistently. They'll work harder and more consistently. There's a different ethic that goes with rural life. And anybody that's in it, and if take those people that are in the rural areas and move them to cities, and they'll be transformed from more productive to less productive. Because all of the concerns of the city come caving in on them. How many people have I seen? We used to say, city people is country folk. City people is country folk. It's true. They migrated in the grand migration from the South, white and black, into the Detroit city. They made music about it and songs and the lore of all the people moving to Kansas City, moving to Detroit, moving to Cincinnati, moving from Appalachia into the factories in Akron, Ohio, and Cleveland. And then what happened to them? Well, they got sucked into the culture and the crime, the organized crime, the unions. Everything goes to seed, and then it eventually does what? It dies. That's why in the 70s developed on that belt that runs from Pennsylvania along the Great Lakes and on over to Chicago. That whole area is called the Rust Belt. It doesn't exist anymore. The manufacturing is gone. The steel mills are gone. Why? Because the consumptive culture of the cities and drawing people in there, it got crowded, and it eventually, the parasites destroy it. That's what happened. It's going to happen. Anytime you have that politic, the politics of the union mentality, that which, by the way, is destroyed in America now. The most powerful union in America now is the government workers union. That's not productive, friends. Government workers, that's not produce. That's consumption. You can take all of politics in America, friend, all of politics in America. I talked a while ago about coalition versus consensus. Let's make it even simpler. Accountability versus non-accountability. Accountability versus non-accountability. Accountability means you only get to kill what you eat, or only get to eat what you kill. You only get to eat what you kill. To put it in terms of the frontiersman, he only got to eat what he killed when he first got here. And if he didn't kill something, he didn't eat, and he starved to death, and so did his family. The government wasn't going to help him. There's accountability. You're accountable to others. You're accountable to yourself. You starve unless you make it work. That's the freedom to fail. That makes a man try harder. There is the accountable crowd. A man who's trying to make a living is accountable to his wife and his children. Is also, of course, accountable to God, who says you're supposed to try to do that. Hard. Then there's the unaccountable crowd. Who's that? That's the people that work for the government. Are they accountable? No, they get paid either way. If they put on a good show that they're doing something, but that doesn't happen always either, you know what I'm saying. There's no real productivity going on there. Productivity is producing natural resources and adding value to them through manufacturing. That's productivity, friends. That's wealth. But belonging to a bureaucracy that makes life hard for those trying to produce wealth is not productivity. But those people get paid a lot. They're not accountable to do what? To really produce something. You say, well, I know of exceptions. Did you know that no government in the history of the world, no government in the history of the world has ever successfully produced minerals? None. Did you know that no government in the history of the world has ever successfully produced agricultural products, farmed? Well, they tried it in Russia. They starved for 70 years. The commune farmed there. That didn't work. Did you know that a government can't even, listen to this. This is a true story in America. A government cannot even successfully run a whorehouse. That's not productivity, but they can't do anything. The question is not, they tried that. They took over the Bunny Ranch out there in Nevada, whorehouse outside of Reno, I think it was, for back taxes, and they tried to keep it going and make the money. Of course, who would go to a place like that where the government's running it? I mean, tell them they'd probably keep track of everything and everybody. I just make the point. The question isn't, is government qualified to do this, that, or the other? Let's just give the thing we know for sure. Government is not qualified to do anything. But the law requires there's a couple of things that government needs to do. One of them is national defense, and the other one is justice, the courts. And those are all necessary evils, trying to deal with the evils of man. We don't know what else to do. We have to do that. Well, the Bible tells us that. We live in a cruel, dangerous world. You say, Brent, you're against government. No. What you're seeing in all this waste of trillions, not billions, not millions, trillions, all of it is not government. That's not authority. That's not jurisdiction. That's a bunch of demon-driven folk that want to destroy and fill their lust. That's all that is. Give me more money. $73 billion shoved out the door. I just heard the other day, $73 billion. Shoved out the door within just a few weeks to the environmental agencies before Biden left office. He said, I got to make sure everybody gets their money and makes them feel good. Let's rob them as much as we can before they throw us out. That's called the unaccountable crowd. They get money, whether they produce or not, and they don't produce. No, they hassle those. They restrain production. Restrain it. They stop productivity. Brent, if we followed your policies, I can hear some of you saying it. There wouldn't be any government. Everything would be chaos. No, it wouldn't. You don't have to worry about me stopping men's greed. Government is a tool for greed. That's what it is. To steal, kill, and destroy. So it's our job to keep it to a minimum so it does the things that have to be done, that no one else can do. National defense and justice. National defense and justice. And then if we take our Bible, the laws of nature's God, and take the first principles out of the Bible about the kingdom of God. I read a book years ago called The Greatness of the Kingdom. The Greatness of the Kingdom. By Alva McLean. Alva McLean, he was living in Indiana at that time, in a place, well, I won't tell you more about it, but Alva, things I didn't agree with. One thing he did understand was that the kingdom of God is great, and the principles of the kingdom of God, and he went through the Bible, big, thick book. I read the whole thing, don't remember all of it, but I remember the general heading of the book was that the Bible gives us first principles of government, how government is supposed to operate. One of the things I remember, he said that Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, compiled to himself horses, riders, and girls. Girls! Oh, he had hundreds. He had hundreds of wives and concubines. And the law of God specifically says, don't do that. Oh, well, I mean, if I like girls, you understand. Got 5 daughters, a wife, and dear friends like Miss Francine. But I'm not to have a harem. And that's a constant, never-ending temptation to men because you see the positive things and it goes to seed, and we're not to do that. We're not to allow those in government to do that either. What's wrong? It will destroy us. And this is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long.